I'm just going to showcase. It's one of those things. I'm going to do souffle because it's one of those things at home. It's a bit of a mystical art, which is a lot of nonsense, really. All you got to do is make sure you got a hot oven and be confident about how to make a souffle. I'm going to make you two different types. We're going to do a savoury one, and then we're going to do a sweet one. And there's two different ways of making a souffle. So we're going to make a savoury one using a creme pat, which is like a thick-based custard, and then we're going to make a sweet one, which is a raspberry souffle, and that's just by using a meringue style. So it's something really easy to have a go at home. So in a pan here, I've got half a pint of milk and 2 ounces of butter. I've just melted that down. And then I've got a dry pan, and I've just got some smoked bacon that we're just going to cook that down. Because bacon and cheese, you just work so well together. It's a bit of a must. The cheese that I'm using two types. I'm using a cheddar style cheese. You can use whatever cheese you want, really. Things like Gore with Caerphilly, or even blue cheese works really well if it's nice and strong. Just move the bacon around. We want it to crisp up slightly and to release some of the fat. And then we've also got Parmesan, because Parmesan's got a real depth of flavour, and it works really well into souffles. It's also quite light, and it means also you don't need to put too much salt into the mix, because then you can just use the seasoning from the bacon and the cheese itself. The colour on these yolks is absolutely fantastic. Compared to normal shop-bought eggs, there's a massive difference. So much more vibrant in colour, and they've actually got a bigger depth of flavour. So we separate the eggs. I'm going to put the whites in one and then the yolks into the other. And what we're going to do is we're going to beat the yolks with some flour that I've got here. And then we're going to whip the whites separately and then fold them in towards the end. And then we're going to return this back to the heat because you're making a custard, a savoury custard in effect. So all we do, just pour that back in. And then as this is thickening, and it's nice and hot, we're going to add some cheese. Now, really, there's a set amount, but to be honest, you don't need to worry about it too much. So all we're going to do is just add the cheese. Now, I've grated that on a really fine microplane because it just melts down a little bit easier. And then as that thickens, all we're going to do is just add some bacon. Now, we're not going to add all the bacon there. We're just going to add half. Just take some of the initial heat out of it. And we're just going to leave that just to sit. So we've got the egg whites here. And then all we're going to do is whip the egg whites. So we're just about there. A little bit of give in it. And I'm just going to hold it at that for a second because I want to line the molds. So all we're going to do is, I've got some soft butter. And then we're just going to, using your fingers, just line the inside of the mold. So thoroughly line it all the way around, making sure you come right up to the rim, and then brush across the rim, okay? You do have to work quite fast. Last thing you want to do is for it to be too hot, and then you knock all the air out of the whipped whites, and then it just doesn't rise. So the remainder of the smoked bacon, we're going to put some into the creme pat that's in the bottom, and then I'm just going to take the whites just that little bit further, just gently folding in the mixture again, and then add the remainder, and then just take it in a little bit further, like so. So it's nicely incorporated, and it looks light and fluffy. You know you've got the air in there, so you'll be fine. And hopefully, I say hopefully because souffles are a little bit unreliable sometimes. So we're just going to line the molds, 3/4 full. Now, when you're doing savoury souffles, a classic souffle is a twice-baked cheese souffle. So you par-bake it first, and then take it out, turn it out of the mold, and then bake it further in a dish. We're not going to do that with these. We're going to, hopefully you guys will be able to try a little bit. what we're going to do, we're just going to put a little bit of cheese just on the top. You don't want to put too much because you don't want to weight the souffle down. And then when they go in the oven, as they're rising, we'll open the oven door and add a little bit more. So these ones are going to go in on the top. And these will take roughly 10 minutes. Maybe a little bit longer. I'm going to measure up here probably about 100 grams. This is where sometimes, depending on what fruit you're using, you can use black currants. If you're going to use black currants, I'd add a little bit more sugar because they can be quite tart. Red currants are really nice. When you're making souffle, one key thing is make sure you don't get any egg yolk into the egg white because otherwise they won't rise. You need less protein, so that's why we're separating the egg yolks. And don't throw your egg yolks out because it's really easy just to make nice custard or creme brulee. Like I said, we've got 100 grams of egg white and then we've got 100 grams of sugar. And one thing I will do is I'll just taste the egg white then as I'm making this. When you're doing a normal meringue, you're going to add it in gradually. So you don't want to take the egg whites too far first. So we're going to break them up, keep them on a high speed, and then as we get closer to the point, we'll turn them down as we add the sugar to form a meringue. So what we're looking at is we want it to be pouring consistency, but aerated. So we're just about there. And then we're going to gradually add the sugar. And then you're thickening the egg white, and this will just hold. So you can do this with plenty of notice. If you add the sugar into the egg whites too late, and if you over whip them, they'll get like a separated effect. Because what happens is the more you whip the egg white, if you haven't got anything in there to stabilize it, you separate the water from the egg, basically, and then it becomes really bobbly. And that's how come sometimes your cakes might collapse or your soufflés are just very grainy. You tend to find that with savory soufflés that they have a little bit more texture and grain to the egg white because you're not stabilizing the egg white with sugar. And you'll see the difference in a second. So the last bit of the sugar going in. You'll see that it becomes really glossy, and then you can keep that going for probably 5-6 minutes. If I keep doing that on this, you'll probably burn the motor out. And there we go. So a really glossy egg white. There we go. So good meringue. Okay. So that's your basis of a souffle. We're just going to line these couple of molds with some caster sugar. Use caster sugar, don't use granulated. Granulated obviously is bigger on the grains of the sugar and it'll just be a little bit more textured in the mouth because it won't quite dissolve so well. Again, you've got to make sure these are well lined, otherwise they'll stick. Now, in work, we make sure that we measure out, try to measure out, because you don't want to be wasteful. Because you're going to line the souffle mold, but then you need to throw the sugar in the bin. Because the last thing you want is any fat or whatever going back into the sugar, leaving it on the shelf, and then it'll turn sour. So you don't want any of that. So we're just running it round, just around the mold, and tip the excess into the bin. So we've got 4 little souffle molds lined. Now, for the raspberries, we've got some really nice fresh raspberries that were given to us from the market. Now, what you can do is you can make a puree out of these. Put them in a blender with a bit of icing sugar. That's it, job done. That's your raspberry puree. I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to do is, I like the texture of the raspberry. And I've got a few holes in my teeth. So at the back, I don't like all the seeds going in, so I don't like to blend it up too much. So keep a little bit of texture. All I'm going to use, just a fork, and then just a bit of sugar, and then just mash them around. You're going to get all that lovely flavour. The sugar's going to create a bit of juice, and you're not going to break the raspberries down too much. I'm just going to check on this. Now, they say don't open the oven door when you're making soufflés. It is a lot of nonsense. We've got a consistent temperature, okay? And nearly there. Probably about another 2 or 3 minutes off. But because we've got that tray on the bottom, we're keeping that consistent heat, so there's no temperature drop. So you're pretty cool with those. They're pretty good. So then all we're going to do, into the raspberries, some meringue. And you can be as rough with this as you like, because the meringue's stabilised. You don't need to panic about it, he says. I'd like to say with plenty of confidence, but you just never know. But 99.9% of the time, these are going to work, and you're going to look pretty good in front of your friends if you do this as a bit of a party thing. So, nice colour, fantastic flavour. Because the raspberries aren't cooked, you've got that really fresh sort of flavour. Now you could add a little bit of lemon juice to that, or you could reduce the sugar content. It doesn't really matter. You're kind of making it to your own taste. And then we're just going to fill the soufflé molds. Now, this is two completely different style of soufflé. The first one, you've got to treat it with a little bit of care to be able to make sure you've got plenty of aeration. This one, you don't have to worry about it so much. Now, if you made a raspberry coulis, at this point, what you could do is just put a little bit of coulis in the bottom, and then top off with a little bit more of the soufflé mix. And then when they cut into the soufflé, you might end up with a really nice pool of liquid in the center or at the bottom of the soufflé, which is quite nice. To make it really nice, you could split the top of the soufflé open and then just dollop a nice bit of raspberry sorbet or a bit of vanilla ice cream in on the top. And again, that's it. So all we're going to do, just use the back end of a spoon just to push the ends down like so. Don't worry about the overhang just yet, because we're going to clean that off. And what we'll do, we'll just done this. We'll take the other soufflés out of the oven. So all we'll do, just use your index finger and your thumb, and then just gently touch the edge and create a little rim. And before I go any further, I'm just going to check these. So nice soufflés. Now if you twice bake them, you can turn them out like so. I said I wasn't going to do that, but I did it anyway. It is hot. I would be a little bit more careful maybe if you haven't done this before. I just gently turn them out. Now, an old roux favourite was to add a little bit of the soufflé mix into some cream, put it in a hot bowl, and then put it with a bit of cheese over the top and then gratinate it under the grill. And that was a true classic soufflé. So there we go.